guest?
Yes, I would love to. First of all, David is a good personal friend of mine, so I'm very excited to make this introduction. And I had the great honor and privilege of listening to this specific talk live at the excursion, and it was fabulous. So I'm really excited for y'all to listen to this talk. So if you don't know David Teachout by now, where have you been? Again, he's had the most RfRx talks. So David Teachout is a mental health therapist and consultant who teaches how relationships are at the heart of our humanity. David grew up as a Christian fundamentalist, attending a Bible college where he earned a bachelor's degree in theology and psychology. During his studies there, David deconverted and has been on a journey of appreciating humanity and all the stories we create to build meaning and purpose. He has a master's in both forensic psychology and counseling psychology and is currently focused on studying philosophy, ethics, and law. David has been actively working within the field of psychology as a therapist, social worker, consultant, and subject matter expert for over 15 years. In his spare time, David enjoys reading a lot. Feel free to look up him on Goodreads. It's extremely impressive and quite frankly, intimidating. Participating in fitness events, also intimidating, and getting out into nature as much as possible. David's business can be found at lifeweavings.com, and his writing can be followed and subscribed to at humanitiesvalues.com. So, yes, I'm so excited to welcome David Teachout. Hooray for, what is it, your 50th talk?
The
Only
numbers keep
50?
increasing. Yeah,
Only
it's kind
50.
of
I thought
like,
it was at
the
least in the
number of
triple
words
triple
that
digits, David. It has to be at this point. You've been doing this for
right.
5 years.
Yeah. Yeah, when was my first one? I think it was like 3 or 4 years ago at this point. That's interesting.
So
I think.
question, would you like to look at the
Mm,
poll results first, or would you like to do the talk?
absolutely.
All right.
I see there was already a comment about not liking some of the options for, I believe it was number two, which was pretty much the only really serious question.
All right,
And we will
Glenda, could
definitely
you
cut.
could you read the results there?
Yes, I will go through all the questions. So one, do you believe in mind over matter? First choice was clearly, I'm not an atheist, 9%. Haha, trick question. Atheism doesn't demand naturalism at, again, 9%. Haha, double trick question. Atheism totally demands naturalism at 6%. The majority of the vote was for, well, shit, this is another one of David's polls, isn't
Very
it?
good, people.
47%.
Very good.
And then other was 28%. Question two, is mental health something to be solved? At 52%, yes, pathologies are curable because they're diseases. Just above that, at 35%, is no, pathologies are for life and I can only persevere. 3% is wait, if I'm diseased, does that mean I'm broken? And 10% is if this isn't a lifetime thing and I didn't choose it, sounds like sin. Question number three. I love my body. 34% said yes. And I know that might not seem like a lot, but it is a lot. I'm very happy for that answer. 3% said no. 17% said yes, and shape is ridiculous. I hard agree with that. And 45%, which is the majority, said no, I struggle, which unfortunately is very, very common. Four, who's excited for the Daredevil premiering tomorrow on Disney? Me, 24%. Also me, 12%. If you're a friend, you too, 20%. And then 64% at the vast majority was, if I was blind, I would totally take up martial arts and wield a big stick.
That's awesome.
Cool. Do I need to
Being a
like stop
practicing
sharing?
skeptic, I always have to turn my skepticism off when I watch that, but I love it anyway.
Oh, it's such a good show. I love it. Plus,
Uh,
everyone in that show is super, super, super easy on the eyes. If we're talking about like bodies, really
Just a
easy on
bit.
the eyes and fun
Yeah.
to and my celebrity
Yeah.
boyfriend John Bernthal's in that show.
Oh, yeah.
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 And, yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Hmm,
Okay, David, so go
bring it
for it.
in. All right.
I've been waiting to see this since I missed the Fall Excursion back last year, and now I finally get to watch it.
Yes. So, apologies to everybody who thought somebody was going to be talking about evolution and who's much prettier than me. Unfortunately, you get me in all of my, bearded glory. So, I am wearing a very nice therapeutic cardigan, though. So that should help mollify any hurt feelings. It practically oozes therapeutic rapport. That and I just like them because I have an old soul. Um, so with that, and I'm already liking some of the discussion happening in the chat. Keep it going. And again, if you are having any questions, which I thoroughly expect, because I'm probably going to step on maybe a couple of toes here. I'm going to try not to, but hey, it's me. So there it is. Some ideas around therapy, around how we live our lives. Particularly, it struck me when I was kind of rehashing this an hour before showing up. This was a last minute thing. That actually this talk is extraordinarily timely, given everything going on and the state of affairs concerning, the 2032 asteroid that will, possibly, blow up a city. I'm sure that's what everybody was thinking when I was going there. Has absolutely nothing to do with anything else.
As we're a
So
nonprofit, are we allowed to talk about astronomical problems?
yes, we are talking. We are
Okay, good.
talking about
You want to clear that up? I want
giant
to make sure about that.
orbs in the sky
Okay.
who like to destroy everything due to massive asteroidal egos.
What's the latest calculation on the percent? Is it above
I
3
think
yet?
it's actually like 15%. It's
Mm.
into the low double digits. You know what? Bring it.
I watched a video on it. It's
Yeah.
interesting. They know where it would hit on Earth within, like, they don't know the time, but there's a percent,
Ooh,
whether it will or not, but they have the
yeah.
path if it's going to where it would hit, which is really interesting.
Oh, I have not looked at that.
Yeah, it's not the
I'm
United
gonna have to
States,
look that up.
so oh well,
Is
the
it
rest of the
It's
world.
not the United States.
Murfreesboro?
Not
Oh
the
well,
United States. No.
I mean, it's fine. It's all good. Yeah. So because with that, because let's face it, everything that's going on, I don't even really need to set the agenda for my therapy clients anymore. I can pretty much just assume that there's a central theme going on, which gets interesting because of the nature of my job, at least in the nature of the job that how I approach mental health therapy, which is a minority opinion. I will freely admit that. My, I'm not there to help wallow in the kind of anxiety and fear. Like, I'm here to help. I'm here to help figure out, okay, so given the things that we can and cannot control, um how do we continue to move on and live our best lives, insofar as we know how to do that. And so I don't really, I mean, let's face it, there are times I would love to actually just dive deep with a client and just be like, that's right, fuck it all. It's just, there's a piece of me that would love to do that. And if the various AIs are listening in my kitchen, you undoubtedly they will be picking up any number of other comments that I make when I'm not, on therapy time. But the reality is that in some ways I actually deeply appreciate the job that I have, simply because it forces me, as I try to do so with integrity, do my job, to not, swim in the seemingly inevitable pool of concern and anxiety and so on. I don't have that luxury with my job. And I mean that without, truly any judgment about it. So, please understand some of the language I may have may not be perfectly articulate. But because there's a lot of things that are going on, all of our food. So one of the things I like to tell my clients is all feelings are legitimate. Whether or not the behaviors that we then do to support those are also legitimate, not necessarily the case. So the initial response patterns that we have, our emotional states, one, you cannot control them. You can't. Nobody's sitting around going, I'm going to have that emotional reaction next. I could have had that one, but nope, I chose to have this one. It's not happening. We can't do that any more, frankly, than we can do that with our thoughts. Nobody's sitting around going, I've got like these 10 thoughts that I could have, and I'm pretty certain I'm gonna choose this one next. I mean, the very thought experiment itself proves, the kind of amusingness of it all. Amusingness, I am coining that term. And because the reality is things are just popping up. They're just there. And so as a consequence here, two things. One, we should never, ever, 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 ever really feel shame for the thoughts and emotions that come up in our heads. Because we don't choose them. This is where it's the lie of the so-called ethic of Christianity, where if you even think of adultery, you have committed it. Bullshit.
David, I think
That
that's
is the most asininely ridiculous and absurd understanding of human psychology. It's absurd. It's truly, and not even a fun absurd. Like, I have fun with absurdity. I literally have a little plush doll of a goat on my desk. More on that later. Simply because I have fun with absurdity. But that's a malignant form of it, because you're blaming people for things that they have zero control over. So, and that does lead into the talk here. It truly does here. Because what we do on a day-to-day basis, the things, the environment that comes up in our minds is not anything that we have direct single one-to-one connections or relationships with. We cannot do X and immediately go, well, this is inevitably what's going to happen in all time circumstances and so on. We are constantly swimming in a sea of probabilities of which we have a little bit of influence on. And that is not to, wallow then in despair. It's not about, well, fine, then I give up. I am not. I have my moments of pessimism, but I am not a cynic. I don't believe in a libertarian form of free will. That does not mean I'm a nihilist either. It means that, and this goes into that first question around mind over matter, it just means that we live in a naturalistic world of which cause effect relationships and all of their many varieties are the soup that we are dealing with all the time. So in the midst of so much turmoil, it is, frankly, of course, we are going to be looking at our futures in the various ways of which we all have varying, concerns. Not here to compare about anything. Again, all emotions are legitimate. Whether or not the stories and actions that come along for the ride, that's a whole other question. So, yes. So good comment there. Still struggle with shirking that training, indoctrination, feel guilty about everything. It's not a sin nature, it's just being human. It's an interesting, with that small caveat, small little tangent here. But Eric Fromm, FROMM, he he looked at what sin kind of was in a reflective psychodynamic perspective, in Neo-Freudian. Anyway, and he was looking at, it's like, isn't it fascinating that human beings are literally the only creature that could come up with the idea of having been cast out from paradise? Like, our consciousness provides the lie that we are somehow separate from the natural order of things. And is not then, particularly if you're a romanticist, thank you, Rousseau, that the natural order is where, pleasure and, goodness resides. Didn't we all used to reside in some perfect state of nature, and then all of a sudden government showed up? It's like, I don't fully agree with that, by the way, but it's a fascinating point, and it's a secular version also of sin, that we were at some point in this perfect state And then something came in and crashed into the business, and now everything's all, foobar. Okay. It's in some ways a it's a lie of our consciousness, a lie of our conscious experience that separates us from our bodies, that says that somehow this is different than this, that our bodies are somehow separate and distinct and cut off from what it is that we are thinking and feeling. And that is 100% false. Here's going to be a statement that's going to be this actually touches on that mind over matter question. It also touches on a little bit of the diagnosis piece of being solved. The very notion that there is something intrinsically wrong with you that you did not choose is often, not always, definitely there are a lot of caveats here, but quite often is, in my estimation, a secular version of the sin doctrine. That there is something intrinsically wrong with your brain. Again, it's not a soul thing, it's a physiological issue that you can't do really much about, and you just have to suffer through it for the rest of your life and know you didn't choose it. Excuse me, what else is that? other than some kind of being cut off and cast aside from a perfect, form or nature. It's nonsense. Hence why I have enormous, and actually gave a talk on this a while back on some of the issues with how we frame mental health. And I won't rehash all of that here. But suffice to say that this notion that there is somehow a indelibly, broken or hurt or diseased thing about you that we can slap a mental health label on, and that you will then possess forever, is not always really all that helpful, even though it can be very helpful in a very practical sense of having insurance cover mental health therapy. And so let's admit that there are a lot of different areas here. So, but part of what's going on there is that the label is often functional for getting a service. I have literally had heads of psych departments tell me when I asked about, well, what if they don't quite meet specific DSM criteria for a particular diagnosis? And literally been told, don't worry about it. I'm sure they probably met it sometime in their life. Regardless of the ethics of that. I am not sharing slides. Is that regardless of the ethics of that, that is a rather peculiar way then of going, well, wait a minute. If what the person is showing up as and the behavioral issues that a person is wanting to address are not necessary for having a diagnosis, then why does then the diagnosis persist for the rest of their life? Like it's on a chart somewhere forever. I've worked with clients who have had an issue with that, where they've been put on with like major depressive disorder in particular is a big one, particularly given the certain jobs that you may try to get into. And it doesn't matter if you haven't had treatment in years, doesn't matter if you haven't had an episode, whatever even that means necessarily, for years. It's somewhere on a chart, and your future employer could go, well, we really need to have a further evaluation about this because these things don't go away. Well, wait a minute. How how destructive to a person's life that regardless of what you're actually going through, we can put a label on you and label it and call you this and say, well, this is what you're going to be dealing with for the rest of your life. And here's what makes that truly problematic when it comes to how we organize our lives. Because how we frame ourselves is all about predicting and determining how we are going to use the resources we have available to deal with what we believe is going to be happening next. That's why when socially things are so disrupted, we have an increase in anxiety and depression. Because we've been looking around going, well, I don't really know 100% what my life is going to be like, but I have a general idea that things are stable enough that I can utilize, social resources and, make decisions and so on. You start ripping those things away, the brain starts going, wait a minute, I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to make sense of the present in order to predict the future and what I'm going to need to step into. I don't have that anymore. The things that we have taken for granted are no longer there. Incidentally, this is why gaslighting in its true form, not necessarily everything that shows up on TikTok, but in the sense that, you are actively telling somebody that what you see is not true. In other words, it's lying. The issue of lying is about telling people a deliberate falsity of which then they can no longer operate with that kind of like, well, I need to make a decision, but I'm literally making decisions on a false sense of what is real. That's what's so awful when we engage in that. So coming back to the body again, we are fundamentally biological creatures. So this goes into that, the question around atheism and naturalism, which frankly would be a whole other talk, and that'd be fun actually. Does atheism demand a particular metaphysic or epistemology? Rob, it's happening. We're gonna do that talk.
We'll find a spot. I'm sure we can fit you in somewhere.
Sure we can do that. So, but here I'm gonna say that we do. So my own idea and bias here. And that is that one, we are biological creatures bound within a natural monistic, i.e., singular existence. I'm not a dualist. Mind is not some extra natural thing. Nor obviously directly the soul. In fact, if you're here, probably most of you don't either. Curiously, though, we often talk as if we do. And this goes back into some of the labels that we do, because labels, whether or not they're a pathological disease label, whether or not they're an identity label, doesn't matter. Labels are just linguistic shorthand to help explain to another person and ourselves what it is that we are seeking to move through life with. It's kind of like going, I need to get basically from A to B, so we have a space. Now, if we look ahead and go, oh, okay, so that space is open road. Awesome. Then I can be a sports car, or I can be a jalopy, or I can be a bicycle. It's okay. This is all I need because it's an open road. I can deal with this. If it's, say an open water system. Ooh, okay. If all I have is a bicycle, this is gonna be a problem. The labels we do are shorthand to say, okay, here's what I have available. Here's how I think about myself and the resources that I have in order to then make decisions going forward. So the problem though is that we often will use those labels as if they themselves have some kind of force. So, for instance, here's where things could be fun. When we use the phrase, religion is a problem, or religion does X, fill in the blank. There's no such thing as religion. It's not a thing floating around like a flying spaghetti monster, wondering about who it's going to snatch up with its tentacles. Like it's not, it doesn't exist as a force. It doesn't exist as an actual entity. It's a label that we apply to a myriad of collected behaviors and social experiences and so on. Religion doesn't do anything to you. The people who utilize it and utilize various aspects of it and utilize various iterations of it, they do those things. And this isn't meant to be just simply, language, pedantry. Like this is not, this is an issue of going, if we get caught up in the language games of, it is very easy to imagine that how we describe the world is equivalent to the world. So when we say that this thing did something to us, we then act as if it is something out there that we have to fight. And it becomes monolithic, it becomes overwhelming to be able to deal with it. Because it's a whole lot easier to deal and go, you know what? That asshole down the street who's wearing the God hate, waving the God hates fag sign, I can deal with that SOB. Like I can deal with him. He is a legitimate person I can go up and yell at. I can sue. I can do any number of things. I'm not an advocate for violence here. But it is this thing like the tendency, I get it. The desire would be there. But it's like you can do something with them. And yet, what can we do about this thing, this label? Not a whole lot. It becomes this like miasma that we're trying to deal with. And what we hopefully should be, and this is what I try to do with therapy, and this is what I try to do with philosophy, this is what I do, this is why I operate from the perspective of acceptance commitment therapy, ACT, is that we are actively looking to create flexibility with how we interact with the world in which we find ourselves and all of its disparate, issues. And what I found is that when we take the time, or rather when we blindly just accept that the language we're using points to and is equivalent to reality itself, it curtails our flexibility. It hurts our ability, it limits our ability to respond because it becomes very difficult to deal with that. It becomes very difficult. Hence why sin, and there's the part of the question why I put that in there. Sin is, really, most of it's left it. It's one of the reasons why actually, when I also gave a talk a while back on my walk away from Christianity, and part of it was, and actually was an analysis of the doctrine of sin, because sin was this amorphous thing that we're like, okay, well, what is it? Well, it's a relationship thing. You're cut off from God. Okay, how does that work exactly? Like germ theory, we have this. I understand what happens if I'm cut off from traffic, I guess. I know what happens if I'm unable to, move things. I know what an injury is that makes it impossible for me to do certain things. But what exactly is sin? Like, what is this thing? Well, it's this, quality that covers you. Yeah, okay. All right, all right. How does that show up exactly? Oh, okay. Well, it shows up in bad behavior. But believers do bad behaviors. Yes, but okay, wait a minute. Now you've lost me again. How does this actually work exactly? If it's so broad that it encompasses anything, including its opposite, then you're not actually telling me anything. But it's the vagueness that is the point. And that's where we come up into the language games that we play, whether or not it's a particular religious doctrine of sin or separation, or it's I just have this, my depression today made me do this. My anxiety today made me do this. No, no, it didn't, because it's not a thing. It's a label we've already applied to particular behaviors. So coming back again to, we are bodies first, in an attempt to make sense of the environments in which we all find ourselves. So from Timothy Gordon's book, Timothy Gordon and Jessica Burishak, the ACT approach, Comprehensive Guide for Acceptance Commitment Therapy. So if anybody's interested in ACT, this is actually the book that I start pretty much everybody on. It does a fantastic job going into explaining some of the philosophy behind it. Is discusses relational framing. Helps us understand how humans bring thoughts, memories, sensations, and feelings that we are not directly presented into our present moment experience. This process is arbitrary, meaning it is socially constructed. Humans constantly derive arbitrarily applicable relationships between things, even things you've never before considered. And we do this all the time. We make connections that aren't necessarily true, and certainly no more true from the moment in which we made them. And yet we often will think that, for instance, how often, we go, well, based on my childhood, this is why I'm the way I am today, despite the fact that 40. So I'm wondering what the last 30 years had anything to do with it. But there's this thing called childhood that now exists and is enforcing what it is that I'm doing now. Not a thing. It happened in a particular, point in time, but we're still making connections to it cognitively, to a constructed memory of which we are currently no longer within, in an experience that we're no longer in. To be very clear here, though, this does not mean that we can't have conversations about the stuff that we've all gone through. This is not about dismissing the experiences that have happened even in childhood. What it is about removing ourselves from the assumption that what our minds are coming up with are somehow disconnected and are a force that is acting on us, that is different than me. It's not. We're still bodies trying to figure this stuff out. One of the first things that can be extraordinarily helpful when dealing with anxiety, depression, and all the reactions of which are fully natural as in and of themselves, is to consider our emotions and thoughts as guesses. They're attempts of figuring stuff out. I'm thinking of one of my favorite examples is actually from Robin Hood Men in Tights, in which Blinken, who's blind, is up on in the forest, and Robin comes up to him and he's like, "Hey, Blinken, what you doing?" And he's like, "I'm looking out." for the sheriffsman. Right. But you're blind. Well, I guess I'm guessing that they're not here in the forest. I guess that they're not coming in. Right. That's basically what we're all doing, is guessing based on limited information to figure out how we're going to move forward with these bodies. And the less we hold on to that picture, the more flexible we have to shift our thoughts. This is why we left dogma. Dogma is about inflexibility. Dogma is to say, we don't need to ask questions. We don't need to know anything other than this label and story that we have given. I don't need to know anything else. If we left that, why would we go back to it just simply because we haven't labeled it a religious thing? We can change that. We can question. This is, incidentally, and I told you it would come back up again, is why I have a plush toy of a goat. I have absolutely no idea why I find goats funny. I don't. I have no clue.
Have
I
you
just
seen the
do.
movie Men Who Stare at Goats?
Yes, awesome movie. In fact, so I have a book called "You've Goat This," which is filled with like funny little fun phrases and pictures of baby goats. And in fact, I encountered this book at the camp that we have the excursion at. And immediately when I saw it, we were there, it was at the camp director and it was in her office. And I was leafing through it and I'm like, I mean, it was like instant Amazon. Like I'm ordering this. And it was waiting for me when I got home from the excursion. It is awesome. And absolutely adorable. But the idea here is that for myself, in having some fun with absurdity, um, goat yoga is absolutely amazing, by the way. If anybody wants to have a lot of fun. So, but is that whenever I'm encountering a thought that's just like stuck, and it's like I'm just, like this is not how I want to keep doing, I will simply add a goat into it. Why? I don't know. It's utterly absurd. But you know what it does? It gives me the facial reaction, much like Rob just did. Going like, wait, what? It jars me away from the being caught up in this thing again. This is so it's various practices within ACT as well. Again, that are based on this notion that we are physical beings attempting to make sense of the world through guesses and limited information, and that if we instead, by encouraging a reaction on us, a physiological reaction that goes, wait, what? That it generates a laughter, that it generates a felt sense of confusion, in fact, it's helpful then to jar us away from getting stuck on those language games of thinking that, well, because I thought it, it must be true. Because the reality is, it isn't. Certainly not in all ways and in all times.
That's an argument for God that I've actually heard people call the ACA shows with, that if you can conceptualize something, it has to be something that's real. It's like, what?
Yep. In fact, it's one of the, isn't that the is that the cosmological argument or I forget which one, but it's
I
like
never remember those
that which,
philosophical names.
yeah, but it is the idea of like that which nothing greater can be thought of. Oh, it
Yeah,
must be God.
there must be a
Like, wait a
greater
minute.
thing that if you can think of that, that it's
Right. It's the ontological. Thank you. Which of course, again, is a fundamental misunderstanding of human psychology. Like, this is, just because I can think it doesn't make it real.
but it's
And this is
so
where it
easily
goes
defeated. I
into,
don't understand why people believe that's a real statement. Okay, I'm thinking of a a 50-foot pink unicorn in my attic. Like what? Therefore, it's real. I don't understand how you can even conceptualize that just because you want to have an excuse to prove what you already believe about a deity. That's the reason.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, there are some better articulations of the argument. I will admit that, but really it does just boil down to mind magic. It's really what it just that's what it boils down to. It's mind magic. And it's just not true. But that's where we get back into that relational framing that ACT is based on, and in that allows for a physiological universe to be, because we're just sitting here going, it's just their brains like just trying to figure shit out. Another way of looking at it is I love D&D, and it's been a long time since I played. But so instead I've been reading a ton of lit RPG genre books. So if anybody wants to geek out about what would happen if you were sucked out of this world and into a universe where you had like stats and could pick your character class and so on, so much fun. It was absolutely candy for reading. Yes. Nerd, and I'm proud of it, madam. Um, so
And I just want to tell
the
people, David, who are watching this in the future, who don't see the chat, that you're not just randomly making these statements. You are applying
yeah, there
to what people here are typing into a chat, just so they don't think
yeah,
that you have, difficulties there.
I'm not just making stuff up in my
Yeah.
head, like
Yeah.
what I
Yeah.
literally just got done
Yes.
talking about.
I say it with love as a
Oh,
fellow
absolutely.
absolute geek,
Uh,
nerd, every fandom logo on the back of my car.
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah. An inordinate number of the books I've read so far this year are lit RPG. So it's really, it's really a lot of fun. Dungeon Crawler Carl, hell yeah.
So about
Anyway, coming
movies,
back to this.
what did you think of Free Guy?
Oh, that was awesome. I
Yeah.
mean, yeah.
That
That
that went
and
to the top of
Ryan
my
Reynolds,
all-time favorite list. I think
so
I've seen it 5
delicious.
times now. I love that movie.
It's feel good. It's fantastic. Absolutely love it. It's like that one and the other one where he has the kid earlier version of himself. It's fantastic. Love all of it. So coming back to then we're going, okay, so flexibility, basing on the fact that okay, so if all we have is this, it means that what we also all have or only have is the connections we have with one another, the experiences that we have, the dialogue that we engage in. And this is why it's like I talk with so many people who are so focused on this as if this is somehow cut off from what the rest of their body is doing, that they have lost sight of that so much of how we function in the world is, if not everything, depending on how nuanced you want to get there, of course, is through our movement, the relationships that we have in all of their variations, and also what we eat, the resources that we have. I realized that, kind of lost track of the D&D example there. It's like you have this, you have a character, you're figuring stuff out, you're going, okay, I'm going to go on this quest. Life. What is it that I need? Well, I'm not sure. I'm going to try to base things off of perhaps my previous experience with this dungeon master, who may or may not be a colossal pain in the ass, but in love to spring new stuff on us. But it's like, all right, I'm thinking this is my goal, so I'm likely going to need these things and that thing, but I'm also going to need a party, people, other characters that I'm also then going to need to understand better how they do things and what they bring in on this journey that we're working on together. We are in many ways, because I just love this nerd, totally nerded out metaphor, that we are in many ways on this kind of like D&D quest, figuring shit out, guessing on how we are going to get the prize at the end of the journey. And we have the things that we bring with us. We have the character traits that we were born into genetically. We have the relationships that we form and utilize and work with going forward. I think it was Oliver Wendell Holmes, I think, who, his phrase, you are like the company that you keep. I think it was him. By all means, correct me if I'm wrong. But it's the old thing of like garbage in, garbage out. If you are, this goes into what are the resources that we do. And so that's where, yes, Giga from the chat, for those who are watching this in the future. Thank you, Rob, for reminding me of that.
I shouldn't have mentioned that. I should have just let people think you were just
just
answering
let
voices
it.
in your head.
Right, yeah. So we have those relationships with people, our past, the memories that we are reconstructing on a daily basis of that past, the environment itself, including, geology, the mechanistic things that we deal with. How we frame our experiences is dependent on, what car we're driving, whether or not we even automatically think of a car to get into, or whether or not we think of automatically a public transit, or if you're in, a totally other country where it's like, well, no, I need to get on a horse or a camel or whatever. Like all of these things then have relationships with how we view our world, a little micro version of it, and what behaviors we then think are available to us. I mean, it's one of the weird mythologies of, of America, is this notion of every person deserves a car because we need to go west, young man, and conquer the continent, and explore and expand, constant expansion. That's what we need to do. In order to do that, everybody is going to get a car. Well, that's a really interesting story, and there's a whole lot to that historically, but it's a really interesting story. Like, how many of us, when we turn 16 or 17, depending on the state you were in, was thought that the coming of age moment was to get your first car. Like all of a sudden it was like, okay, now I have independence. You find out that you really don't, because there's this thing called gas and you have to afford that, and now you have to job and so on and so forth. But it's like now we have independence, and then it comes crashing down on us. Wait a minute, did we not have independence before? Or were we so myopically focused that independence must mean some kind of four-wheeled vehicular movement that without it, suddenly we don't have it anymore? That's extraordinarily inflexible. And yet, how often do we do the same things, think the same ways with other things? Without this, I have lost. Fill in the blank. That's really the only way that you can support that particular value is through this. Again, we're making up these stories, and all of them are varying levels of legitimacy. We don't have to get stuck on them. Some of us aren't even, so comment, thank you. Some of us aren't even allowed to drive. So living in a car dependent city would be a really bad idea. Yeah. And how awful would it be for you to find yourself in that situation? And we start expanding that, like, okay, well, wait a minute. What are the things that I'm doing that curtail possibilities and I'm not even fully aware of what I'm doing? And now we come to then movement, nutrition, and community. Basically the three bedrocks of how we develop mental health. To be very clear, this is not a simplistic, and I would hope that by this time nobody thinks I'm, endeavoring to be simplistic. But all right, for future people who aren't aware of me very well, this is not some simplistic thing of like, if you eat an apple a day, you'll never be depressed again, or some kind of other garbage that influencers on various social media peddle. Like that is not this. These things, these principles I'm about to go into, these three areas, movement, nutrition, and community, are about a bedrock. They're about a foundation of which things are then built on. Because again, we are physiological creatures. We have to start with this. We don't start with this. We spend, and I am somebody who, huge intellectual, I love intellectualizing everything. It's one of the first things I had to really work through when I started doing therapy, is my tendency to do that. So I get the draw. But we need to spend less time here and more time in the space in which we find ourselves. And it is, again, this is about a foundation. This is about, for instance, I had one client long ago who was dealing with, severe anxiety. It was like, I'm just like heart's racing all the time. I don't really know. I'm like, okay. He'd been to multiple therapists, and I was like, so what's your caffeine intake like? He's like, what's that have anything to do with it? I'm like, okay, we'll leave that alone for a second. What's your caffeine intake like? And found out that he was doing like 12 energy drinks a day. I mean, it was insane. And like, you're imbibing at 200 milligrams per energy drink, which is very standard. Like, holy crap, it's amazing you don't have a heart attack. And so, and this is not an anti-caffeine thing. I love caffeine. Thank you very much. It's a recognition that what we put into ourselves is contributing to the foundation of how then our brains, again, physiology, are going to make sense of the environment in which we are then stepping into. Because it's going, wow, I have a whole lot of, energy here, and I'm not sure what to do with it. So it must mean that I need to be nervous about what's coming up, because the only reason I would need this kind of energy is if something potentially big is about to happen. Otherwise, I wouldn't need it. I mean, that's effectively why we drink energy drinks and coffee and so on, because we're projecting forward, like, I need the energy for the next thing. That's what the brain's doing. So if you overload it, the brain's going, wow, I really must have a big thing coming up. Well, if you're constantly reinforcing that, what's the brain going to do? It's going to keep coming up with bigger and bigger and bigger things. Slowing down a bit. Curbing what it is. This is not about abstaining from all of it. And please, by all means, if you're a major, because caffeine's easy, if you're a major imbiber, do not just go cold turkey. Oh, you're in for a world of hurt. So, kind of slow down it. Do not just simply go cold turkey. You're gonna feel like shit if you just stop. So just be aware. But that too as well. Yes, by the way, thank you for the shout out for the Cloven Hoof series in the chat. Awesome series. It's absolutely hilarious. In fact, and that goes into physiology, because Satan is cast down to earth and he's been given a body, but he has absolutely no idea how it functions because he never cared before. So he's eating literally anything, and he actually hasn't had a bowel movement in like multiple weeks, and he's in enormous pain. And people are like, well, don't you know that this needs to happen? And it's like, but that's disgusting. Welcome to having a body, buddy. The whole series is it's not quite that juvenile. Okay, so part of it is, but yeah, it's a lot of fun.
So as our speaker that was scheduled today might have said, that's not really a very great design. of bodies.
Yeah,
You have
it
to do it
is
that way.
definitely not.
If you were all
Yes.
powerful God, and you could have come up with something else besides that to do. Yes.
Yes, I think that every time I step out of the shower and my new puppy decides to, you know, jump up and attempt to nibble on anything that happens to be external. Yeah. Bad design. Yes, not good. So anywho, um, so when it comes to physiology, then like that's just one example. Like, what are we doing? Yes, so it is not puppy teeth anymore, let me tell you. He is now like 8 months old, and full on, like, his pitness is coming out. It's I love it. But whew, yeah, there have been some close calls on a few occasions. um so uh so let's come back to movement for a bit. um for instance, today about half of all American adults, and I'll actually share the link to this here shortly. Today, about half of all American adults, 117 million people, have one or more preventable chronic diseases. One or more preventable chronic diseases. 7 of the 10 most common chronic diseases, and these are physiological diseases, as opposed to necessarily, mental health. That's a whole other thing. Are favorably influenced by regular physical activity. That is from the previous Surgeon General. Um, and there's the link to the physical activity guidelines, as put forward by the Surgeon General. Notice that, like, 7 of the 10 most common chronic diseases can at least be influenced to some degree by regular physical activity. I mean, I knew it was big when I came across this, when I was doing research for this talk originally. Blown away by this. It's just insane. Now, again, this does not mean if you go for a walk every day, you'll never have any heart issues. That is not what any of this is. This is about figuring out what we can influence within the broader recognition that obviously there are any number of things that are just outside of our control. But what we can influence, why wouldn't we? Especially if they're influencing for the better. So, exercise improves mental health by reducing anxiety, depression, and negative mood by improving self-esteem, cognitive function. And we're using this is from Sharma Madan, and from the Journal of Clinical Psychology, or Psychiatry, rather. There's a link. I'm not sure if you'd be able to download that. If somebody cannot download a particular article, by all means, email me. I have, done all these, so I can send them to you if you really want to read the actual academic articles. So, and it does this by recognizing that our bodies need to move. I'm sure bring up these things when we have what was her name again? Who's supposed to be here tonight?
Abby Hafer.
Abby Hafer. When she comes back to give her talk, which would be fabulous, definitely want to be there. Bring up some of these things. Like, we are not that far removed from the evolutionary environment of which we evolved out of. We just are. We're still operating largely with the bodies we've had for millions of years. Like, it's just, here we are.
Yeah,
So
I gave a talk on critical thinking, and one of the write-ups was basically that our brains evolved just well enough to have us survive on the African savanna better than our competitors, and we haven't
yep,
changed much since then.
we have not. We haven't. And so it's little wonder then that here's where the pernicious quality of depression in particular, of which I will totally own the fact that I have a tendency towards, And is that in some ways, depression and anxiety as a kind of label we apply to certain behavioral tendencies um, are natural responses to actually help us out. I mean, anxiety is a recognition of the body brain going, something bad could be happening. We need to be paying attention. So let's ramp up the systems and figure out what we need to be paying attention to. The difficulty that has happened is that we are being so inundated by things that could be a problem, and we spend so much time here imagining things that anxiety system is running rampant all the time. Hence why flexibility, kind of separating ourselves from the, just because we think it doesn't make it real. It's just a guesswork of what we're doing. And by movement, we can sometimes go, okay, but I can still move, even at just a basic level. Going for a walk is going, when it comes to depression in particular, it wants us to what? Hunker down. Why? Because we need to conserve resources. Depression basically says anxiety had its game, had its chance. We're done. We have gone so past anxiety, we might as well go, the whole world is going to go to shit. So I'm just going to hunker down and conserve what little thing I've got left. So I don't move. I eat poorly because I want to feel good somehow with some kind of dopamine hit. But what are we doing then with that? We're actually perpetuating the very thing that perhaps initially is a legitimate way of going, no, we should be, worry is okay. Perpetual worry is destructive. Feeling depressed, in fact, there's actually some really interesting research about a certain level of depression helps with cognitive functioning. It actually makes people slow down enough in decision making, and they can, kind of analyze things a little bit better. But again, it's a very thin line between that and then falling into, problematic depression where we no longer are thinking very clearly. So this isn't about trying to, fit there. So, right. Yeah, I'm past that point of depression for sure. Comment in the chat. Absolutely. Again, this is not a say, and I know I'm going to throw out this caveat over and over. Apologies, but really want to make sure there's, somebody pops into, minute 42 of this talk that they're like, he didn't say, like, no, this is not about that you go off on a walk and all of a sudden depression goes away. It's not it. This is about the habits we get into that help solidify a foundation that allows us a felt sense of having some flexibility to respond. So that sometimes, yes, if we're feeling trapped, to actually go out and prove the fact that we are not trapped at the base physiological level by going for a walk. I'm not trapped. I can go for a walk. May not be huge, but I can do that. It's that dissonance that we are using as a tool to encourage flexibility. Same thing comes with then second thing, nutrition. It's very much not, hence the whole like, I love my body. And I have to say, I love the fact that see 34 and then 17, so 51% of you answered yes. That was fantastic. Like one, just 34% said yes unequivocally, and another 17 said yes, and shape is ridiculous. And what I meant by shape is that, it's like you have to look a certain way. This is for me, and remembering, and I use this example all the time. It was the Sports Illustrated body issue from years and years ago. Ronda Rousey, and so that's dating that a bit, was in it. And it was various athletes, and it was naked, like all of them were naked. And it was absolutely beautiful because you saw these people who are, many of them making millions of dollars. One was a baseball player, and he was by most metrics obese, like just did. And he's like, I my body is exactly what I have done in order to hit that ball really big, really long. Like here it is. I don't need to run real fast if it's all the way over there. Like it was fantastic. Um, Rousey herself would talked about, she was going how it's like people might be seeing me in this issue and go, but wait a minute, you look different than when I've seen you in the fighting ring. And she's like, well, yeah, because this is my normal. There's fighting trim shape, and then there's every day. Why? Because our bodies serve a function. They are for a purpose, which is why nutrition is so important, because it's feeding us for what purpose? Well, there's the question, isn't it? If you want to have a certain form in order to have a certain outcome, then there are things to do in order to do that, because it's a function. It's a question of what outcome. What are you wanting to use this for? This is one reason why it's like, I love, small versions of triathlons and sprint versions and so on, because I'm not crazy enough to do any longer than that. And obstacle course races. Why? Because it encourages, for me, a function. Like, I want to be able to do this. So in order to do that with some small level of hopeful, not too bad injury, I need to be able to then engage in other activities of certain exercise and nutrition in order to have a form that I can then engage in that activity. But let me tell you this real quick. I have been on numerous obstacle course races, and there are body shapes all over the place. Like, it is absolutely amazing to be able to go, and some of them, quite frankly, they're kicking my ass. And by a certain metric, be like, well, how is that person moving that way? They're, this. Um, because they work at it, and what you look like is only one piece of a whole bigger puzzle of how you show up and live your life. It's just one piece, and it's not the defining one. So there are people who are running up those hills. I'm like, okay, you just beat me on this. Fantastic. That's one of the reasons why I love doing them, because then go out there and everybody's there to do the same thing, beat this course, but how they show up to do it is hugely varied. It's beautiful. It's humanity in action. It's all of us figuring out, like, we are collectively having this goal, but there are so many ways to achieve it. That means that all the more, though, that we do pay attention to what, our movement and our nutrition, because what we take in is going to inform how we are then going to address and deal with the things we want to do. So some very, actually we'll share a link here. There we go. Yes, thank you for that comment. Glenda will love that one too. Love the food that was so nutritious, the excursion. That was a deliberate choice on our part. Like, we had fun going through, Costco and so on. Because it's so easy to go, well, we get that. And we're like, no. We're going to encourage a healthier, not in a shaming way, obviously. The last thing you're going to hear from either of us is shaming about any of this. But it is a understanding that if you do nothing but eat processed foods and sugary stuff and so on, you're not actually going to feel all that great. It's not helpful. And I say that as an avid fan of candy, but I'm
Right.
careful about how I do it.
Right. And I love junk food like the next person. I had a Velveeta skillet meal the other night that I just put in some Beyond Steak tips in, but I still ate a thing of basically hamburger helper with Velveeta. But yeah, I love that the food at the excursion was brought up because again, that was an intentional thing that the food team we all came up with. And I think combining there is hedonistic pleasure to be had in food like that, like nutritious. I mean, all food has nutrition. I don't want to be dumb about that. Like, but there is, I promise you can find hedonistic pleasure in food that is going to give you a better fighting chance with having your mind body connection than you realize. Like the charcuterie table and the salads, like you're gonna feel better. It's gonna taste better than, yes, the church camp food, which is genuinely like upsetting for me to think about and remember of like the off-brand Kool-Aid and then the Oreos and then like this is what they just expected you to eat and then go out and I can't. Not that I can't get junk food, but yes.
Well, and so I mean that's what's actually thank you for bringing up the like church camp food and so on. It is not a big stretch. Now, this is not about conspiracy. It's not about people who are acting like we're going to feed our youngsters this in order to get this real. It's not that. But there is something to be said about if you are wanting people to be a little slower on the uptick and feel a little lethargic, you feed them a whole bunch of starches and and then go and here's a bunch of ideas that we don't want you to think too much about. I mean, anybody had that brain fog when they're dehydrated? Isn't it easier then if we are not thinking fully clear to then fall for bullshit? Like again, this is not like it's a people are actively doing this. Well, certain cults certainly do.
Yeah,
But
I have heard that story, David, where people in cults are encouraged not to drink and eat for extended periods of
yes,
time and also don't sleep.
yep,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, again, and there's, I mean, it's like, so yes, there are obviously examples where people are. Generally speaking, they're just kind of going along with the ride. But there are definitely but it's the one-offs there actually that indicate just how important it is to be aware of what we're doing and what we're putting into our bodies and how good sleep hygiene cycle and so on that we're doing, because it does inform us. And in fact, the people who want to manipulate us know that. Hence why, yeah, that's right. Come out to the our retreat. We'll make sure you never sleep, drink a whole lot, and buy a whole bunch of candy. And by the end of it, we've got you. It's like there's a reason why that happens. So just paying attention to it. So one final point about nutrition, and this leads actually into community. Eat out less, eat in more. One, financially, so much better. But two, you have a greater degree of control and influence over what you're then doing. I mean, the vast majority of meals that you get at a restaurant are enormously beyond the caloric intake that you need. They are. It's insane. How much it went out at one point to there's some Texas Roadhouse or whatever and tried to calculate like what it is I just done. It was like 4,000 calories. And I'm like, I already ate over the last 2 days. Like clearly I don't even need this. But here we are. And so it's that indulgence that isn't really all that helpful. As much as I appreciate going out to eating and particularly foods that I don't make myself. But just being aware of it. Again, this is about foundational stuff. This isn't scamming people and not going out. This isn't, whatever. This is about, you know, taking stock of what it is that we're doing with these bodies that of which this is all we have. This isn't a mind over matter thing because mind is matter. And the other piece around eating out less and eating in more is that it can facilitate then community, which is the third thing. Dinner party, potlucks. I mean, this is one reason why community groups and so on love potlucks, because it facilitates people bringing in and engaging in a lot of different foods and so on that they otherwise wouldn't have access to and don't have the time to make all the time. So have half a dozen friends over and go, who wants to make this and who wants to bring that and who wants to bring this? Great. We'll have plenty to pass around. Actually, when I was back when I was living in Seattle, I had a couple of instances where had some friends where it was everybody brought ingredients to then make the meal together. It was highly amusing at times, because some of us really couldn't cook at all. But that was part of the process. It was like figuring out, how this works. It's like going, okay, I'm going to learn a new skill as well here, and how these things go. And sometimes have foods that otherwise I never would have tried because it was like, I'm going to screw this up. Well, somebody knows how to make it within the group, so it was your idea of bringing this in, bring in the ingredients, so the pressure is off, and you just have fun hanging out with people you enjoy, creating that community, having food. How awesome. Because we were in the midst of, so the 2022 study found that when people were asked how close they felt to others emotionally, only 39% of adults in the US said that they felt very connected to others. A move from, the this to this all the time. I mean, I spend an inordinate amount of time online, so I, will own that. But even previous to this, or the notion of doom scrolling came up, of which we're all subject to at occasion. I get it. Again, not shaming. It just is. At the same time, what social media does is encourages so much time up here in the imagination land that we forget that this matters, that what we have influence over is in the doing, not the clicking. That we can engage with others in a way that reminds us that we still have people in our lives that matter. Obviously, this is not, you do abstain from all online activities. So much of the RfR community is about, we have, and it's wonderful to be able to engage in people all across, the United States and the world in our hangouts. Not about that at all. This is about the passivity of just scrolling, the passivity of putting comments without actually engaging in a dialogue. Because all that does is curtails our ability to challenge and therefore become more flexible in how we think and therefore act. So more time connecting with people. There are various components because of why community is so important. It's household. Who are you living with? Who do you invite over? The intimacy of what that community means in all its various ways. Friend circle. That's supportive. Why is a hug a circle? Like, because we want to connect. Emotional support, mentorship, crisis support, of which RFR, helps out with. And the varieties that we can have with this. Relationship satisfaction, this strain of then why do we feel hurt? Not very much to the question around, okay, we'll get to that shortly. And but again, Why is community so important? Because it relates again back to this. How many of us have, been in, are now or have been in an intimate relationship where the merest touch of skin to skin brings us a level of calm that allows us to be grounded in the here and now, to remember that we are not just spending time up here in our heads, but we are living life, that we need to have that connection. It's why the excursion, as much as I love all of the community that we do online, it's why the excursion is so amazing. I had no idea this was going to turn into necessarily a plug for the excursion, but here we are. But there's a reason for that. And it's why I'm hopeful for some of the ideas that are, percolating for this year and possibly expanding further. Because it gives us opportunities to go, hey, you're not just a face on a screen. You're somebody I can smell. You're somebody I can, hold on to with permission. It's an amazing remembrance of what it is to relate to one another and have time to connect in a way that gets us out of here and into a reality that frankly is just much more meaningful. And then encourages us to go, okay, well, now I'm calmer and I have people in my life. I'm not as trapped anymore. I can do more things because what we do is with other people. That's the power of relating. Every single person we encounter opens up the possibility of doing new things in new ways. How cool is that? So, movement, nutrition, how we use this, and interconnection. These three things, they are not a panacea. They will not solve the orange turd, but they will allow us the space to be able to better, not without bumps and not without bruises, not without difficulty, but allow us to better move through the things that are inevitably going to happen. And there we are. And I know there are so many questions. I saw them.
Oh, there are so many questions. Thank you, David. And I want to remind everybody that what we're going to do now, we're going to give David some of the questions that were put into the Zoom chat. And in a while, if we run out of time there, we will actually open up for the Hangout after that and allow you to ask him more questions. But also, please stick around because Dr. Ray has an important announcement. So let's go with the questions. Glenda, would you like to pick one from the long list?
Oh my goodness. I was in the middle of typing.
All right, I'll do the first one.
You do the first one. I'm pulling up the Google Doc.
All right, so this was actually the first one. Yes, we are all biological machines subject to the laws and rules of physics and chemistry. Seeing as that is true and those laws control everything down to our thoughts, how is an individual responsible for thoughts or acts that are controlled by physics? Ooh, very metaphysical question.
Yeah, I think I actually did give a talk on free will, or I was going to. But anyway, without getting too much into the weeds, this is why I will juxtapose responsibility with causality. And in one way I like to phrase it is that everything that is in your sphere of influence is your responsibility to deal with. Does not mean that it is your fault for being there. So because the actions that we do are an extension of what we care about. So, you know, are we responsible in the sense of, um, like, well, for instance, I phrased it earlier around, we don't have control over the emotional states and, thoughts that come up in our heads. Like, we don't. Are we responsible then for influencing through various learned behaviors and so on of how we then act on those? Yeah. But again, this is not a one-to-one thing. This is about probabilities. This is not, this is why I was trying to be very careful about, this is about these three things: movement, nutrition, and community are about the foundation to allow for greater flexibility of reactions. But those reactions are still limited. We just try to open up the possibilities even by a little bit, and that can be huge. So, are we at fault for things? No, but we're still living in this world. We're still, consciousness itself as a physiological, effect is itself a recursive influence. Okay, well, let's do it. Just don't get bogged down on, if I do this, that must happen. No, you're just kind of helping out. So I like
Yeah,
to hope that
free
help.
will is a really dicey subject, and whenever I hear
Yeah,
these extended arguments about it, I'm actually never sure which side I'm on about libertarian.
so much of it has to do with definitions for me. So
Okay, thank you. Glenda, would you like to pick one of them?
Yes, I would love to pick this one because I think it's a really good one. I agree that sometimes labels can lead into getting into the weeds verbally. However, can't labels also be helpful? Like if I have a broken arm or a headache, broken arm and headache are both labels, and that's what we call those things. And my doctor needs to know which one I have so I can be treated. My doctor can't treat a broken arm the same way they can treat a headache. So aren't there times that labels can be helpful?
100%. I mean, that in a nutshell, absolutely. Yeah, this is, it's so much of this goes into when we recognize that, like, for instance, the thoughts and emotions that would come just pop up are not under our immediate control. They're just varying levels of influence of the next iteration. Um, the labels in themselves, try stopping it. I mean, we of course are going to use them. My caution is only is to recognize that what we're doing is a creative enterprise, and as such are open to change, and open to not being, we don't have to get stuck in it. So in fact, actually, that's a good example. Say, you go in and, like, okay, I have a broken arm. Okay, that's good. We need to know that it's a broken arm and not a broken leg. We want to be able to look for the right thing. But the degree of the break, which bone in the whole arm, all of that is going to shift what the treatment's going to be. Even though labeling, we have said, well, it's broken arm. Okay, but there's more to it than this. And that's where labels are great as long as we keep in context of they serve a purpose, that they are not ends in themselves. We don't stop at the label. We use them to go, and what do you mean by that? Kind of thing.
Right. I
So it's
I
one of the things.
personally am a big fan of labels. I mean, I have a lot of them for
Yeah.
myself. Like I label
Yep.
myself, I'm an atheist, I'm a feminist, I'm a traveler, like I love going places. They're helpful to me, but I also hope again that they don't stop at me. I am more than just these one-dimensional things as they were. So, I think nuance. Oh no, what a suggestion. What?
The company, the giant corporation I used to work for, in its ever escalating um, decision that it had to make us work better together. It always came up with these things that it promoted every year. And one year it was, and then they printed labels and they printed stationery and they gave it to everybody. Labeling someone is the worst thing you could do. And that was like the whole year's thing. And then the next year, the thing was, oh, we have to understand what generation everyone is in to work with them better. So you're a millennial and you're a generation. It's like, don't
Right.
you people hear
Wait,
yourself?
what? Oh yeah. No. And that's where it's like, one of the things, somebody, I have a new client, they're like, well, I have, I'm depressed. And every single time I go, and what does that look like for you?
Right.
I have my assumptions, obviously. I can't help it. I can't help the thoughts that are gonna show up when I hear a word. It's what our brains do. They fill in the gaps. Well, wait a minute. That's what bias is. So, okay, I need to check in to see whether or not the things that automatically came up in my head are full of it. Like I could be completely wrong. And yeah, sometimes what a person used as a label and what they then describe it as is way outside of how I would use it.
Right.
And
On
that
on
itself
yeah.
is then fun for dialogue.
On the helpline, I routinely have to ask people, what do you mean? Because they might say, I think I'm atheist or I think I'm agnostic. Okay, what do you mean by that? Because there's multiple ways people see those two words. There's multiple ways people see almost every word. So yeah, it's an important thing. And all right, speaking of depression, the next question was your talk about anxiety and depression as response to different things. Aren't they also chemical imbalances in the brain? Depression and anxiety medications are things that people do and take them, and these medications work for them. I guess then the unasked question was, how is that?
Oh, that's a whole other thing. And I'm totally gonna get hate mail. The chemical imbalance theory is nonsense. I'm sorry, not sorry. It has long been, known to be a completely false way of understanding how our brains work. It's just that it works really well as a descriptive heuristic. Um, and so people just keep peddling it. um, but there have been multiple meta studies and even structurally, I mean, there are just so many problems with it. It's just not true. What drugs are helping with is not about finding and notice there real quick. Notice the assumption of what is then happening there. It is an imbalance. So what we're doing with this is trying to what? Get you into a perfect balance? That there was some ideal form that you need to be in order to be correct? What standard is that? I don't even know what do you mean by that? And that's one of the problems with the whole imbalance theory is that there is literally zero way of determining what is or isn't at any given time a proper percentage of the extant literally dozens of interactive neurochemicals. Like there's just no way, we have no way of measuring that in its total. You can, in fact, when it comes to measuring, in fact, there are some tests that will measure certain, but it's always in retrospect. And at any given point in a day, you can measure, say, certain levels of, dopamine or serotonin, for instance, these are the big ones, even though there's numerous other ones that inform, where our moods are. And there is zero overlap between where those are and one's felt state is. There's just none. You can have a upwards of 300 to 400% change in a particular amount of neurotransmitter in your system at any given point in a day. The fluctuations going on are massive. So this is not meaning that drugs can't be helpful. I've met numerous people in which they found them very helpful in the past. I forget which one I was on for a short period of time. Found it enormously helpful at the time. Okay, but this isn't about returning you to some solid state. What it is about helping to some degree with the physiology of flexibility of going, okay, so for instance, the way I like to describe it with people is that you have a window of opportunity that your brain says, and at the bottom threshold it's like, I passed this threshold, I'm going to be depressed. I passed this upper threshold, I'm getting anxious. What the meds do is change those so that, for instance, it takes more to have that felt sense of being depressed, or more to have that felt sense of being anxious. So you have then greater flexibility in being able to respond to things that are going on in life. But unless you change your habits, the drugs aren't going to be nearly as effective.
So is this equivalent, I'm thinking of it in a physical sense as opposed to neurological sense, your pain. So you can take a painkiller and it will work if you have a certain level of pain it's trying to suppress, but if the pain's too bad, it'll push through that and you'll still feel the pain. So the way would be to try to repair your body so you don't need all the medication.
Right.
Did I get that right?
It's lots of nuances there,
Analogous,
but yeah,
sort of
that's a decent way of looking at it. Hence why the foundation thing. There's if you it's not going to matter. Say you have ADHD, you're taking a med for that, like Ritalin or whatnot. If you have terrible sleep, it's not going to be as effective. It's just not as simple as like do this and up this, like it's some kind of gauge that we have to tweak. Is a whole lot more complicated than that. Um, Basically, I consider psychiatry to be far more art than science. And I've seen, unfortunately, way too many people who then get put on a drug when then are not told what the side effects are, and then find themselves going, "What the hell?" And I'm like, and I lose my mind about that. But yeah.
I was prescribed anti-anxiety medication after, because it was PTSD after an assault, and I was having really bad nightmares, and my therapist prescribed me anti-anxiety medication. And one of the side effects is literally intensified dreaming.
Oh,
I know. I wish I could make it up. It's not. I was wow, it's getting a little worse. And like looking at the side effects, like, okay, like,
practically
Yep.
every medication I see, whenever there's a commercial and they put the side effects, some of the side effects are making your initial condition worse. It's like that seems not to be unusual.
Well, so one of my favorite examples, because I work with a lot of veterans, and nightmares are a very real issue. And one of the drugs that people get put on is called prazosin. And basically what it does is it helps with blood pressure and heart rate. And now, admittedly, I'm not an expert in this. What I think is actually happening is that when we're dreaming, our brains are constantly, again, that guesswork thing that we're doing all the time. It's just that it has really available is just the crazy stuff that's popping up. And so by artificially lowering the heart, the blood pressure and heart rate, and I realize those are two different things. It's not giving the brain the information of elevated heart rate, which then will be interpreted as a threat internally, and then of course you can't move. And what bigger threat is there than feeling like there's a threat and you can't move away from it? And therefore it'll generate and facilitate nightmares. It's going to make sense of it. It needs to make sense of what's going on. So by not having your heart rate go up, likely less nightmares. Here's the thing though. um Depending on when you take it, blood pressure is also good for sexual activity. So if you take it too early, it can then have negative side effects for that, which then the person, if they're not told this and explained what's going on, will then go, well, now I have various erectile issues, for instance, which then can generate depression and so on, because we're then making up stories about why that's happening. And if you're not being told that this was a blood pressure thing, then you're going to think there's something wrong with me. So it's one of the first things that I, work through with everybody who's on it, is just kind of going, okay, listen, if you think you're going, planning on, going to have some, good sex times, wait to take it afterwards. you know, so again, we are this. This is not mind over matter. This is mind is matter. So what our bodies are doing, there's a big, nice word for it, but it's called interoception. But it is the internal environment that is being interpreted by the brain in order to help make sense of then how we are then dealing with the so-called external environment. That is a whole other talk that I could give. So, yeah.
So, okay, because of time, we have to move on to the next
Yes.
part, but I just want to just make sure I'm right on my perception of this. You probably aren't somebody who believes in manifestation, right?
No.
Yes. Just think it will happen, the secret. Okay, so thank you very much. I have to, of course, thank Glenda for stepping up at the last moment to be a co-host. And also, of course, David, who just jumped in with almost no warning to this talk. And Kara, though their voice is very grating and horrible, and I can't believe they're still functioning at this time, stayed and actually pushed all the right buttons and helped us along. So thank you, everybody there. Okay, so let me tell you about the next RfRx. It is going to be Natalia Pasternak from Brazil. She's going to be talking about misogynist psychotherapy, another psychotherapy talk, sort of, not exactly. Misogynist psychotherapy infecting the health and legal systems. And after that, we have people like Neil the 604 Atheist, Stephen Novella of The Skeptic's Guide to the Universe, Mallory Mackey of Mallory's Strange World, and Erica Matthews, and a whole bunch of other people. So as we say every week, follow us on social media. We have a link tree now, which is Recovering from Religion. We have Facebook, of course, same name. We have Instagram, which is RfRorg. We have TikTok, which is at Recovering from Religion. We're even on Blue Sky at recoveringfromreligion.org. And of course, on YouTube, you can find, as we said before, 226 of our previous episodes from this show on our YouTube channel, and that is Recovering from Religion. And let's see, what's left? Glenda, please tell us about what you think the benefits of volunteering might be.
You get to be in the room with us whenever we surprise David, like, by the way,
You're
like,
up, do another talk.
yeah, that's very fun. You get to be part of the cool kid club. Yes, I think to really be serious about volunteering, because there's been some discussion in the chat about it. A lot of us are hanging in there. To describe it, it's tough right now. And if you are looking for ways for it to not feel so tough, we find that helping others can help you help yourself. That's kind of also what this talk was about, on helping yourself and what you can do to give yourself the best fighting chance. And if you have the energy and the means, we would love for you to consider volunteering here at Recovering from Religion. We have such a wide variety of positions that we are seeking. We're always looking for new people, always looking for new skill sets. If you're into tech, if you know anything about graphic design, if you know anything about marketing, we'd love to have you over here. So please head over to recoveringfromreligion.org/volunteer, and you can get connected to being part of the very, very cool kid club where you can see us flailing like Muppets behind the scenes trying to figure things out.
Okay, thank you. And let's see. Yes, we have a video that you can watch to refresh your memory about everything that we said we do here. It's on our main page, recoveringfromreligion.org. It's at near the bottom. It's RFR, what we do. It's just 3 minutes long, and it summarizes everything we took 15 minutes to tell you at the beginning. You can refresh your memory, or you can pass it on to anybody in your life who you think might be of our services. So thanks everybody again. And again, don't go away. We're going to have a hangout. But first, we are going to have Dr. Del Rey say some words. Hello, Dr. Ray.
Thanks, Rob. Say some words. Okay, I'll try to say some words. I wanted to thank you, David. What you've just talked about fits well with what I want to talk about briefly. It's an important thing. I think because if you enjoyed what Dave just told us, I think you may find it interesting to entertain participating in this announcement. One of our volunteers out of Germany, Emily, is doing a research project, and she is asking for volunteers, both volunteers of Recovery from Religion and people like you who may or may not be volunteers, to join her research project, which involves being able to learn some new skills in compassion-focused therapy. It's actually quite closely related to what David's already talked about. She's doing I had it all up here and then I lost it, damn it. Hold on, I was gonna read a brief piece. Oh, brief piece. So if you would like to find out more about this, you can go to the announcements place where Emily put it up just today. Actually, she's been announcing it for a couple of weeks now. But it'll comprise of two groups, an experimental group and a control group. And the control group will participate in 4 sessions that teach compassion-focused therapy to the participants. And it's intended to help people promote self-kindness and reduce self-criticism. Most of us who are raised in religion were taught very well how to criticize ourselves and second-guess ourselves and all those sort of things. This particular research project will also focus on things like mindfulness or be related to mindfulness and compassionate imagery. So within the context of these 4 sessions, you'll have at least her or one of the people involved in her research project, and always a trained RFR volunteer moderator will be present as well. So this has been examined and approved by the board of directors of Recovering from Religion. I think if you decide to join this, you'll find it beneficial. And I think not just to our clients, we think it's beneficial to you, because everything David's talked about here, these are life-enhancing skills. David isn't just blowing smoke. I've studied everything David's talking about. He's much more up to date, by the way. I'm just an old fart that remembers 30 years ago being in graduate school. But what David's giving you is some really, really important skills. And I know sitting here listening to David talk about this stuff, you think, yeah, maybe. But underneath what Dave's saying are real living skills that you can benefit from. And the way I look at it is these skills reduce unnecessary suffering. That's the way I look at it. Because so much of what we do in our brains causes more suffering through these labels and through other things that David's talking about. So anyway, if you're interested in joining this study, I think she's going to launch it in a month or so. So you need to get online. She'll send you the information. You can fill out the form to volunteer to be in the research project, and it's only going to take a couple months. I think weekly meetings for a couple months. I don't know the details of how that's going to work, but anyway, just want to let y'all know that's coming your way. And if you know somebody within the online community that might be interested in this, encourage them to look at it as well. Oh gosh. So I want to go back to what you said, David. I really love the three pieces: movement, nutrition, community. That is so important in mental health, period. So I hope you wrote those three things down and then realize, where am I moving in my life? How am I treating my body and feeding it and supplementing it with nutrition? And where am I finding community? And you can do every one of those every day to a little bit of degree. And I'm just saying, let's encourage ourselves and other people, because right now the stress hormones are flowing through our blood because of some asshole people in the world, and we don't need to let them control us. We can control ourselves. We have the opportunity to take responsibility for our inner and outer world to some degree. So I also like the other thing. 7 out of 10 common chronic diseases can be mitigated through just movement. I wish more people heard that. You could repeat that 1,000 times as far as I'm concerned. I have this philosophy, David. I don't know if I ever told you this, but I don't know when I'm going to die, but I'm going to die healthy. That's the way I look at it. I remember hearing a NPR interview of Jack LaLanne. If you know who Jack LaLanne is, then you must be a pretty old fart like me. But that guy,
I remember seeing him on TV, Dr. Ray.
Okay, well, you and I are two old farts then. But yeah, it was really interesting to hear him talk about. He was at that point in time, I think he was like 92 or 93 years old, and seemed to still be healthy as a horse, and talking about physical fitness as a 92-year-old. And I think one of the things you can do to maintain muscle mass, as you get older, you lose muscle mass. That's just going to happen. But you lose it a lot faster if you're not exercising, if you're not moving, if you're not using those muscles. It's a use it or lose it thing, but you lose it quicker as you age. And so the best thing that you can do for yourself is start early, making sure that you're using all those muscles, so that when your body starts saying, okay, we're going to start losing muscle mass, it'll be reinforced to keep that muscle mass around a little bit longer. Anyway, I also like Dave, mind is matter. It's not mind over matter. I fucking love that. I've heard it before, but many years ago, I thought that's a great way to put it. Anyway, it's too much to talk about. I'm not going to back over your lecture. Thank you so much at the last minute for coming in, and that was a great talk. I think I liked it better the second time than I did the first time. Back to you, Rob.
Thank you, Dr. Ray. Oh, were we going to say something about the fundraiser, Glenda?
I was actually just about to interrupt and interject and say, excuse me. As a reminder, you're just going to have to deal with me saying this every RfRx until it happens. But if you have not heard, on May 10th, we have our big annual spring fundraiser. It's going to be on the YouTube channel, The Line. It's where we've held our previous fundraisers. I think Kara is going to have the link to post in there, youtube.com. I think the channel is Q&A, The Line. Anyway, it's hosted with our friends over there, Jimmy Snow and Matt Dillahunty. It is going to be such a fabulous event. We are beyond excited for this year. We have some really, really big goals, and we need your help to achieve those. So please stay tuned to RFR social media from now until May 10th, and you're going to see us posting about it. And if you're on Blue Sky or Facebook or Instagram, if you could just like those posts or leave a comment or whatever, it really helps our algorithm to be able to reach more people. And the more people we reach, the more help and support that we can provide. So yes, May 10th on The Line on YouTube is our fundraiser. Can't wait.